Hi guys, I'm Abhi.
This is Gauri,
Welcome to the Cosmosis.
where we try to unpack the occult through a varied lens. This particular episode, we're going to be talking about some spooky personal experiences.
And we're going to touch on how media influences our superstitions and the culture around us.
Or just the perception of the occult and supernatural in general. We hope you gain some insight. Look forward to listening to your opinions and views. What do you think? Okay, so let's talk about this. What is the first thing that comes to your head when we talk about paranormal or the occult? Within an Indian context, let's say.
There was like a theme to the point where like a lot of like after a point women did say like you shouldn't be always showing like you would tell you the thing. The chudail thing, of course, the bad where how like the chudail is considered to be bad, whereas like the male counterpart, the sorcerer is like
that person always
put on a pedestal
her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the chudail is supposed to be this evil Diane, right? So that's always there, of course. But my thing is, even with like a lot of horror films, there used to be this pattern. I feel like around 5 years back. Now it's reduced. Now we have more like people are pushing the boundary even further with horror. But like you had a lot of films which showed like violence against women. Like they would either be like rape victims or like would have gone through some kind of like extreme violence due to which they would like haunt the family, or like you would have that redemption towards the end where you would understand where the ghost is coming from.
Right.
So I feel like that narrative became was while its intention was kind of good, it kind of also became like a source of like just like violence, where you had like a visual depiction of just like violence happening towards women. So yeah, I while that definitely does put a light on like a symptom of society that does exist. We do see like domestic violence and like sexual assault. The real things, they do exist. But I feel like and I feel like horror really does cover this quite well. I feel like it has a lot of potential to like if done right, it can very easily be crass as well. Like something like Lakshmi, or like you have a lot of other stuff, or Bhool Bhulaiya too, with the curly hair thing, and like the curly hair person being just like from the bad occult space. In contrast to like the one in contrast to the one who had like straight hair and like minimal makeup. Like you're again moral policing through horror. Like, so I feel like it can be used either way. It can be used to like I'll give you like a real life incident which came to my head when you told me. You told me about this incident that you'd had. You want to like share it?
Which one?
Like okay, so like she told me where you'd gone to Goa with your friends. And you were like she was alone.
I was alone in the house.
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty haunted house. I told my friends the first moment we entered, I was like, I feel nauseous already. Right? I don't want to be here alone. And I was alone in my room for the first night. And the second night I had a roommate, but I was alone the first night, right? Yeah. And I remember my friend offered, she was like, you can sleep in our room. And I was like, no, it's not that bad. But I genuinely felt like something, some spaces, even when you meet certain people, you feel a certain vibe or energy, right? I felt that, and then I remember I stayed back home. All of them left. I stayed back home one day to work because I had a client asking for work even on my vacation. And oh my god, I've told you about this, it was bad. We'll talk about it someday in detail. But I definitely felt like I had to keep the doors of that house. It was a pottery style house, so already very creepy. I had to keep the doors open because I saw
images. It kind of like
I had to keep the doors open because I felt like there was a constant presence around me wherever I turned. So I just sat facing the entrance to that door. I opened it, I sat facing the entrance because I was like, I'm going to run the minute the lights were flickering. It was very creepy and all.
No, that's what, so many times like that contributes to like, just adding that level of eeriness, and like when you feel something that's amiss, right?
Yeah.
But also what like that, while that was also like pretty creepy, but what stuck out to me during that conversation was when you mentioned like there was this guy who was just like on his balcony, and like he was staring right at you without like even moving a bit, without even moving,
like blinking, dude.
You could probably like you said that he was just staring at you, and I feel like now the horror in that, I feel like there were like two kinds of horror going on simultaneously. There was one about like the one like situated in the occult space or something, whereas you don't know what that is, but another one which might as well be even more dangerous is just like an actual man standing there, while you're alone,
and I had to shut the door
alone in this place, and then this person's just like staring at you, and you can, and you can sense when someone's not giving you like that kind of a stare. I feel like women in general are like, they have to navigate society with that in their heads too. Like, what do you think? Like, where you have to think that you can be, it could have been an unsafe situation either way. Do you get that? Like that's what. So I was like, that story was so scary because it added on, like, it added on. There was the horror element, but the real horror element of just like actual interaction within our daily lives also added on to that. Like that's in my memory. That stuck when you told me that. Like the visual itself, I imagined it. You showed me pictures. So I was not of the guy obviously that would have just been.
No, dude. Like I felt like he was a spirit.
From the space that he was staring. Yeah, that's what.
I felt like he wasn't moving at all, and then eventually, like since it was evening, the sun went down, and then eventually I had to shut the door because I couldn't sit in a like 5 BHK, open the doors, just sit there with the laptop in my hand and expect someone not to notice that. So I had to shut the door. I was like, which one do I choose?
No, of course that does sound like something that's that is like a horrific experience.
Yeah, and I didn't tell my friends. At that point. I told one or two of them who could deal with that, but I didn't tell the others because they would have.
You didn't want to like creep them out.
They would have run away.
Let's move out of this like place.
And I took the smallest room in that house because I was like, is ghar ke bade rooms I don't want only. I don't want to enter those spaces.
You don't want that vibe.
I didn't like those rooms at all. And someone asked me also like, how come you accepted this smaller room, right? A friend of mine was like, you must have entered last. And I was like, this room feels the safest. So
I get that.
let's not go there. But it was pretty creepy, that house. Yeah, I'll take you there one day. Bye. You can book tickets yourself for your own self. But very interestingly that you mentioned, there's this very interesting movie called Phobia. Have you watched it?
I think I
with
have.
Radhika Apte.
I have. That's the thing beautiful. Is, she has claustrophobia? No, she has. It's called something else where you don't leave your house.
Yeah, I had it. It's agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia.
Right? And the thing is, she gets molested by a cab driver, right? And that's how she gets stuck inside her house because she feels so scared going outside into the world.
I remember. I saw it like online with my cousin through like
And at her home, she feels scared because she's like, there's some presence around me, right?
That was also I remember it had like a moment about with VR. They tried something with VR in that film.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was really odd. That was the only odd thing that I found. But other than that, I feel like that film was really like it definitely was quite different. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. But that brought me to
that also like touched on like just like psychological horror, which is what also. And that kind of reminds me of your incident where you saw that man there. He could be a murderer for all you know. I would rather.
Or
have
he could just be a normal person.
Yeah,
Who knows?
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, but like a normal person would not stare at you. Would not stare at you for half an hour, like right at you without a single like body movement, right? So it's either like a psychopath, right, or a demon. And at that point, I would like prefer a demon.
Yeah, that's what I did. I closed the doors.
I would be like I'd rather think that this is a demon or have that demon come in, rather than face the fact that this could be like a really like a psychopath who could really just like who could come and actually like make this safe, make this space like really like it could. Your friends weren't there. You were alone. They were out. You were in a city where you don't like. You haven't lived there. You went for a holiday to Goa, right? So you aren't as familiar naturally, right? So then it does become kind of like a dangerous situation, and with you've seen all those like Indian serial killer documentaries and all
and
that.
The worst part is that the house didn't have network.
That's what. And when you don't have like network and connectivity, that's kind of like very dangerous.
Yeah. In that sense, but interesting. It's interesting also. In
so I feel like that's what like this just popped into my head when you mentioned like Phobia. This is just like a film I saw and I just remembered it from like have you seen The Babadook?
I have not.
You must. Okay, so I saw it initially when I was like while I was in school. I didn't really like. I saw it with my cousin and I didn't really like we had like a routine where we would like whenever we would meet, we would end up watching horror films again. Like the bonding aspect of horror, which I feel is also why audiences like tend to consume that content. Other than that, like okay, so it really didn't like resonate with me as much at that point. I was like. We were both like, oh, this isn't as scary. We were like, where is the like? We were like, okay, it's ghost. We see the ghost. We see this guy. He's quite creepy, but it's not as scary. Like And later on, when we had to see it, like, for one of my film classes, like, we this was like in our assignment, one of the films that we had to watch, and we did end up like, I watched it, I saw it, I went through, and for some reason I feel like maybe just like maturity or just like experiences that you have, like, which you can't really like resonate with in school. I feel like just like a lens that you develop in college, I feel like that just happens naturally. Or maybe when you're just like intending to watch it through that, like, what is it, what's it trying to say, what could this thing mean. And in that film, you like, the beast, the monster, was basically so it's just like a single mother and her kid, right? And she's if I'm not wrong, I don't want to like throw, okay, but like, we can cut this if it's not like but okay, I'll tell you. So basically, the monster in this film represented grief, and the Babadook also became like a very like popular like queer symbol for people. And when I saw it, like, we had like varied opinions even in our class, like, people were like, okay, it's a queer symbol and all that. But when I saw it, I saw why it could also be considered like a queer icon, because like, they lock it up and then they have a deal with it. But okay, eventually, basically, so it's I saw it a little while back, so I don't remember whether she lost her child or she lost her husband. I think she lost her partner. And the thing is, yeah, she lost her partner. She had a kid with her. So the monster, the Babadook, is basically like, again, it's like a representation or a motive for like, grief. So initially she's haunted by it and she doesn't know how to deal with it. But towards the end of the film, we see her like, just reach it ends in this way where like the grief stays. It lives on forever. She goes and feeds it sometimes, and then she learns how to live. Basically, she learns how to live with it. So it's kind of like, it's so I felt like when I saw it, I literally have goosebumps right now when I'm talking to you. When I saw it for the second time, it hit me. I was like, that's so fucking real. Like, this monster, like grief, none of us like grief. Grief is monstrous for us. We all, it's we don't like the feelings that are associated with when we talk about grief, like, so but it's hard to face, that's why, right? But it's also like a part of just life. It's a part of life, it's a part of reality, and you learn to live with it, and over time it kind of like doesn't have that much power over you as it does initially. So I feel like there's that journey that we see in that film, where initially it's like the haunting and everything, and then later on she just like learns how to live with it. Her kid is aware of it, and and it's yeah, I feel like and it kind of like, the main horror aspect of that film was how it starts changing her. So she starts like, becoming aggressive towards her kid. So we are meant to, like, if you see it very superficially, you would think, oh, it's the ghost that's making her, but it's the grief that's fucking with her head, that's going with her head, or that's like,
of course,
kind of making her not the perfect parent, which doesn't exist. But like, at that point, not a parent who's like, she's going through grief, she's going through her own trauma. So that's what. So I feel like horror, the genre in itself, is has so much of potential in terms of just like touching on topics like mental health, or like, just things that aren't easily spoken about. It makes it more digestible. It helps us like add that layer of just like, a supernatural element to it sometimes, which kind of like helps people sometimes, access that, access those emotions that they bury deep down so many times and don't really feel comfortable talking about or accessing.
Okay, so going off of that, let's keep that whole representation aside. Let's talk about what our personal connect to these topics is. Do you want to touch base on any of your personal experiences, insights, or just a personal interest and how that began?
I feel like for me, again, it's all about like the genre. Like, I feel like horror as a genre has so much of potential in terms of like, talking about the other. For me, I've always like, whenever I've seen horror films, it's always been like I've kind of like identified with the other, with whether it's the ghost or the demon or Frankenstein or like, any of that. I feel like it's always because as a queer person, you kind of feel that, and I'm sure as a woman also, you're also made to feel like the other so many times in like normal society, right?
Even the makeup.
So that's
and stuff,
and so that's so interesting when you point this out. Like I haven't seen Bhool Bhulaiya 2, but that point, I get where you're coming from. Like for them to show and associate and put that label of like the good occult is like that includes a woman who's like who has straight hair, who's nice, who passes like those checks for like what's acceptable.
Minimal makeup.
Yeah, for what how I feel like it's through this male gaze where people see like oh, this is how a woman should be, so this is good, this is acceptable, and so many times obviously because of internalized misogyny, women also end up perpetuating that, right? So whereas like acha baal apne aise kyun hai, theek karo, straighten karao, like we have those things, conversations, we've heard that in our
I don't think any country does rebonding as much as India does.
No, that's what. So these conversations are so like common for all of us to hear around us within our families. So I feel like that's very interesting. Like I didn't know about this.
Yeah, and to like
but that's such an interesting point where they actually like I feel like that's such an old thing to do now that they're still doing it is kind of sad that they're showing. That just speaks to like the brand of Bhool Bhulaiya as a film series. That no, that's what
I know film students coming out.
Yeah, no, that's what. So it's just like where they're still perpetuating something of that sort, like where it's like first of all, like these films should stop commenting on like women's bodies and how they should carry themselves, and second of all, I just feel like
I feel like it's very interesting though to expect that from Bhool Bhulaiya too. I wasn't expecting the fact that they had
I honestly
parallel.
from Akshay Kumar too. Like he did a film where he was like a trans character and apparently
Lakshmi.
I never saw that.
Yes, it was called Lakshmi if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I think that's the one. And it was based on a Telugu film, I guess, or like a South Indian film. I'm not sure if it was a South film, but like I never saw it, but I saw a lot of like I heard. What did you think about it?
I have views.
I'm sure you would. See, obviously I can't comment in the way that because I haven't seen it, but I know a lot of people did say that it was very problematic.
It was problematic in that sense, but also when I saw it, I saw what the makers might have been trying to do, which is saying that
they didn't have a single trans woman in the team.
They didn't know that. So the like casting and stuff is a separate
in terms
thing.
of casting and even writers, like that's what I looked at that they didn't have like a single writer who was trans. So that's why a lot of writers were like, there's one Ghazal Dalewal, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
So she also commented on this, like films like these shouldn't really be put out till the time you don't have someone in the room who can tell you that this is not how it works. Like I feel like the curly hair thing. Like okay, the curly hair thing is still a little different.
Yeah.
But like just you would. I'm sure like if a person who hasn't internalized that aspect of like I shouldn't have like curly hair. Who is equal to bad. Like people who unlearned that toxic shit would probably be able to like advocate for that in a writer's room, like I feel like where they would be able to say that this is not something that I resonate with.
No, of course, and that's just a very small, tiny example of you keep your hair how you want to keep your hair. Of course, you straighten it, you curl it, you perm it, whatever. But it's just a strong example of the kind of internal representation that comes through within films.
The moral compass of the society that ends up influencing.
And I'm sure
the occult. Whereas the occult, I feel like so many times like queer people or just like marginalized people are honestly like quite attracted to like this space, but it also that doesn't like mean that it doesn't take away from the fact that you still have a lot of like those rigid elements which kind of want to like define it and like in a way which is not really like open to like other experiences, and if that makes sense,
No, of course, and even within Lakshmi I was talking about, right? Ki, what they've done is they've combined two very othered elements of society, which is basically the paranormal or the occult, right, in the form of a ghost or spirit, and then they've combined that with a person who is transgender, right? So that was something that played on my head. Is did they intentionally try to combine that and show that we're othering a lot of elements of society, right? And a lot of those elements or those people who've been othered into outskirts, might feel a similar way, in a similar way.
And I feel like it's so important for them to like if they're taking their intention could have like when I also saw the poster I was like, okay, they can do this right. Obviously the first red flag was when they like cast Akshay Kumar and not a trans woman.
So let me ask you this question. I've had this conversation with a few people, right? Just for the sake of getting to know their mindset, and we know how the film business works also. We've been film students. A lot of people, how they defend this is by saying that a film won't sell if the protagonist isn't a big star or something. So do you think it could be what's it called, a producer's pressure to earn that much amount?
I get that. I feel like also it depends if you want to do something safe, then if you want to do something safe, then that's then better to like do one of those formulaic films which you know will work with the
But
lead actor, lead actress.
Of course.
Because
don't you think
if you want to like change the space, you have to take those risks.
Of course
like
you
know, I
do.
feel like if your intention is you can't be like, you know, I feel like if you're exploiting you're kind of exploiting entire communities.
No, of course.
It's like how you had like blackface and how you had brownface also. There were so many people who were like, you know, within like global cinema, they like Indians or like black people were often just like, you know, they had white actors hired who would just be covered in paint to like showcase these kind of people, right? Or
Of
even
course.
there are famous examples for like even East Asian people who've been like, you know, misrepresented in that form. So I feel like there has to be that one step that needs to be taken
Of course.
to show that authentic representation,
I
which I
do.
feel like won't happen till the time, like, you know, people if people keep on thinking, imagine if like no one would have challenged that, then we would have still had like white people playing like brown and black people.
No,
You
of
know?
course.
Yeah.
I do also think though that
I get your point though. Obviously, as someone, if you would want
No.
to make a film, you would want to like, you
No,
know.
of course I would want to do
Yeah.
it right, and I would want to include, you know, people who actually have either experienced that thing or gone through that thing. But I do think it is more of a commentary on our audience as well.
Yeah,
You know, the fact that they would not be willing to watch
Yeah.
something like that, maybe.
I feel like so many times it also depends on. I feel like we also underestimate our audience so many times.
And going off of that, we're going to talk about something very interesting in our next episode, which is the legend of Naleba, which talks about something that occurs within daily life, right, for a few people, and it's an urban legend, or maybe it's a true story for some people. And hopefully you will stay tuned and watch that or hear that, whatever you're doing. Yeah.